Good evening. Makes my heart happy to see all of you, all of your faces. Jazz talked the other night about it's okay. It's kind of become the mantra for our retreat. It's okay. Whatever it is that you're working with, it's okay. And Pat deepened it last night with exploring those challenging energies, those limbic lovers. You know, it's okay. It's okay. And tonight we wanted to explore, we've touched on in each of those talks, effort and wisdom, and we wanted to explore it a little bit more deeply tonight, thinking it might be wholesome, might be helpful for you. So this talk is on effort, and in particular on wise effort, and even more particularly on joyful, wise effort. Joyful effort. All of you, or many of you today in the interviews, talk about that question that Greg asked the other day, but what about when it's not okay? Those places where we find ourselves just kind of stuck. And we try to be okay, or we try to welcome in and offer Mara tea, and we just feel like we're in a dead end. So let's explore that a little bit more tonight. And I want to start by telling you a story. It's a personal story, and it happened actually quite some time ago when my husband and I were traveling in Mexico. And at the time, we had one of those big, old, clunky, non-air-conditioned Plymouth station wagons, because we thought it was really kind of cool and funky and we could sleep in it. And so we were driving through Mexico in this big old station wagon. And I was driving one day, and we were crossing actually from the East Coast to the West Coast, and ignorant little beings that we were, found ourselves crossing the Sierra Madre Mountains on a very small road that was literally carved into the side of the mountain. So over here on the right-hand side is mountain. And over here on the left-hand side is not much of anything, actually, including no guardrails. And every once in a while, as we're driving along this little teensy road, that it was just full of switchbacks, just no straight road, hardly anywhere. Every once in a while, there'd be a little sign that said in Spanish, I forgot what the word was, danger. And then just ahead, there would be a place where the road on the left-hand side had fallen away. Oh. So I was driving along, and it was pretty torturous. Our little old Pontiac wasn't very adventuresome. And so it just was like up, and it was hot, and I was tired and driving along. Switchback, I literally got seasick because of all the switchbacks going back and forth in the little wobbly station wagon. And after about 40 minutes of this, came upon a tractor trailer. And in around one of the curves, I saw that not only was there one tractor trailer, but there were two of them, who were even more laboriously making their way across these mountains. And we had no idea how much longer it would be. It had already been quite some time. And so the inquiry was, okay, now what? Yeah, it's okay. And all of the maras that are arising, the anxiety, the fatigue, the confusion, the indecision, what do we do? What do I do? I'm the driver. There's no place to turn off anywhere. No place, nothing. And so it's that kind of a dead end, And many of you in your interviews have spoken of those kinds of issues, Okay, the teachings are lovely, but what? What do we do here? That there, we find ourselves sort of painted into what feels like a bit of a corner, where there's nothing to do. We just know it's like this now. Sometimes when we are looking for solutions to these sorts of, I'll tell you the end of the story, but not yet. Obviously, the heroine lived. So you can read the last page of the book. You got that part, so it's okay. But lots of times when we're in this sort of a difficult place, we're looking for what I call the refrigerator magnet strategy. Those little refrigerator magnets that are at the checkout counter in Whole Foods that say some pithy thing that just really sounds right. And we sort of imagine, I think, that every problem in life has a refrigerator magnet that says, this is what you do when you're crossing the Sierra Madre Mountains, and there are two tractor trailers, that there's a thing to do, and if only I knew what it was, I could just do it, and it would be fine. And what is my problem? That I don't know what it is. I must be incompetent. I must be stupid or something. Or I need a bigger refrigerator because it's not there yet. I don't know. I don't know what to do in this situation. But lots of times when we come personally in those sorts of situations, it's the sort of thing that we imagine there is, that there's a solution to this particular problem. And we can even, kind of look through the suttas or something like that and say, what did the Buddha say about tractor trailers, So the Buddha did offer a great deal of guidance. It's all over in the suttas, and one of the pieces of guidance that he offered us is wise effort. And indeed, wise and joyful effort. Sometimes we can think of effort, in the dictionary it's defined as a strenuous attempt, exertion of physical or mental power, something done by hard work, the force or energy that is applied to accomplish useful work. It kind of, as my friend Sue says, gives me a fever just thinking about it. That effort is this like really hard thing, and that's not really what the Buddha means by wise effort. He talks classically about wise effort as four different kinds of skillful things. One is to prevent the arising of unwholesome states of mind, which deter calm and clarity, to prevent the arising. To abandon unwholesome states that already have arisen. To arouse not yet arisen wholesome states, and to maintain and nourish wholesome states that already have arisen, bringing them by attention and practice to full development. Awesome. Really amazingly wonderful guidance. The question really becomes, how do we work with this? What does this really mean? What does it mean when I'm caught in this little dead end? You know, that dead end that you've been working with all day. What does it mean when I'm caught here? The meaning of wholesome, of course, means to do what is helpful and to not do what is harmful. Towards calm, clarity, freedom from suffering. Remembering that the ultimate purpose of our practice is complete freedom from suffering. Not just those sort of temporary moments, but really complete freedom from suffering. So wholesome is what helps, what should we not do that really isn't going to get us anywhere? And what should we do? What should we cultivate that might help bring that calm, that clarity, that freedom from suffering? Wise effort provides the balance energy that's demanded by this task, whatever this task is. Balanced, meaning not too much and not too little. Balanced. Directed toward freedom from suffering. Pat talked last night, not directed toward robbing a bank. Directed toward real freedom from suffering. And what is for our long-term welfare, keeping the big picture in mind. As little children, we had different ideas about what wise effort meant. At bedtime, we had certain ideas about what wise effort meant. And as we grew, we kind of expanded those ideas. We can kind of keep a bigger picture in mind than that narrow self-interest of watching one more TV program. Keeping that bigger picture in mind. And so the question is, what is the quality of effort that will accomplish this task, whatever this task is? Whatever this task is that you are working with, and you are working with, and you are working with, and you are working with. And it can be different, and it is different for each one of us at any given moment. What is the quality of effort that is joyful and wise, and that will accomplish the task, this freedom from suffering? As you know, the Buddha spoke of in metaphors many times. He spoke in stories that kind of helped to make his point. And when he talked about effort, he often talked about things like tuning a musical instrument. My personal favorite is the sutta on tuning the lute. And apparently a lute, I looked up what's a lute. And apparently a lute is quite difficult to tune. It takes about a day for a master lute tuner to tune the lute. So he talked about wise effort as tuning a lute, exploring how is this working with it, listening, kind of fiddling with it until it's tuned. In another sutta, he used the metaphor of a cook. And he said that a foolish, inexperienced, unskillful cook cooks a lot of things: sour, bitter, peppery, sweet, alkaline or non-alkaline, salty or non-salty. And he serves them to the king. But he doesn't pay attention to whether or not the king likes them. So he doesn't really get rewarded for all of his efforts because he's not really looking to see how's it going, how's it working. And then, of course, in the way the suttas go, he talks about the skillful, he talks about the inexperienced meditation person. He says there are cases where a foolish, inexperienced, unskillful monk remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. But as he does that, his mind does not become concentrated. His defilements are not abandoned, and he doesn't notice. You know? He serves it to the king, but he's not paying attention. What's the outcome? What's happening? And then, of course, he goes on and he talks about the skillful cook. You know, he cooks these things, and then he pays attention. What does the king really like? And then the king says, awesome. I'm going to give you a raise. This is really terrific. You are a great cook. And the monk who really pays attention, how does this practice work with this moment, this experience? That he's the one who really gains the fruit of the practice. Really inquiring, how's it going? And indeed, what's needed. What does the soup need? What do we need? Pat talked last night about our practice as a work of art. What does this work of art need? Do we need to be challenged? Do we need to kind of push into it a little bit? Does the heart need to be gladdened? Do we need to ease off? What does the soup actually need? Can we look, can we investigate and inquire what exactly would be helpful here? And it's like a lot of things. It's like, just think of just something you love doing, like gardening or golf or art or writing or the new electronic equipment that you want to figure out how to use, or parenting, giving the baby a bath, this new baby a bath, how do you do this? But you think about something that you really love doing, and the effort really is effort, but it's fun, You're learning how to play tennis, or you're learning how to, crochet. And you kind of do it, and you look at it, and you figure, and you go, oh, that doesn't work. All right, well, my husband says I'm really an expert at making wrinkled yarn. Okay, let's pull this out. We'll make some more wrinkled yarn. And try it again. Try it a little differently. This didn't quite work. But it's fun, It's fun. When you're doing something that you really love, there's joy in it. There's an inquiry. And you know that, I'm not going to pick up those knitting needles the very first time, and make that really, really complex Afghan. It's just not going to happen. And I will only frustrate myself and confuse myself if I try. So what kind of effort makes whatever corner you feel painted into fun to inquire into, a joy to inquire into? Our biological human tendency is to really want those, I'm having this trouble here, is to want those refrigerator magnets, is to want something that is the answer, quick, dirty, fix it. Chaz was talking about when we sit with something, it opens. I want it to open, but I want it to open like now. And I want it to open in exactly the way that I want it to open. And the problem with that is, if it would open now, it would open now. And if it would open in exactly the way you wanted it to open, it would open in exactly the way you wanted it to open. But since it isn't happening, that doesn't seem to be the strategy. So what is joyful effort? And both Chaz and Pat spoke of investigation. The Buddha spoke of investigation too. He actually talked about 3 levels of practice. He doesn't talk about it very often, so sometimes it can get a little lost. And the first level of practice, he says, is just hearing the teachings. And it's what we do it's what you're doing now. You listen to a Dharma talk, or you go to Dharma seat and you listen to one of those talks, or you read your books, and you hear the teachings, and you hear it, and it really strikes a chord. It goes, your heart goes, yes. We listen to these talks these last couple of nights, and we go, yes, this is awesome. This is great. I love it. And what that is that light in you that Chaz was talking about, recognizing Dharma, recognizing truth. I hear it, I read it. It touches that light in me, and I get it. And it's an important piece of our practice that we hear, we listen, we read, we study. It's an important part of our effort. But it's not going to take us all the way. There's a second level that the Buddha speaks about. Oh, actually, I want to say something else about that too. Sometimes when we listen in that way, we listen with the idea, or a good way of listening is listening with the idea of, let me receive something, let me just be open to what is going to kind of awaken in some new way. But sometimes when we do that, sometimes when we listen, or sometimes when we read, I find myself doing this with reading sometimes, I can be kind of greedy about books, and reading the next new book. And we can kind of listen or study with a kind of greedy mind that sort of implicitly or explicitly says, okay, pretty soon now I'm going to get it. It may not be a refrigerator magnet. Then it's going to be moi who gets it. I'm just going to be, I'm just going to be someone who is just so wise and so smart that I've gotten it. So this self is somehow going to be able to kind of figure it out and navigate. We can be kind of greedy in that way. And the invitation of hearing that the Buddha is talking about is the invitation to just to open, to receive. It's the sort of thing of, when sometimes when you, or not sometimes, but when we come on retreat, and the invitation is to not read. And we kind of get a little antsy. We think, well, how am I going to remember? And how you're going to remember is that what is important for you to know is going to touch that place in you that needs to know it. And everything else will just confuse your mind. So to listen to the teachings and to read and receive the teachings with that quality of spaciousness and availability to receive. Sometimes, too, it's helpful to remember that much of the reception is simple transmission. When we listen to Pat and Chaz talk, when we listen to them talk, we're not getting just the content. We're getting the practice that feeds all of that. So we can listen without even understanding a word. We can listen like the cat listens. Just kind of sensing, what's the message here? Listen with our hearts. Listen with our bellies. What's here and important for me to know, for me to learn? What's valuable here? So listening to the teachings is really of great value. How we listen to the teachings is important. And even then, it's like, okay, there's more. There's another layer. There's another level. Reflecting. The Buddha invites us to reflect. And this is what we were working with, all of us, in our interviews today. Really working with, okay, how really does this work? How does this work? How does this teaching work for me here, now? The Buddha famously said, make of yourself a light. And he wasn't saying, do anything you feel like. He wasn't saying, make it up for yourself. He was saying, reflect on my teachings. He says, what more can you ask of me? I have taught you the Dharma. Reflect on it. Make it your own. Really inquire deeply. What? So if I'm driving up the mountain and I'm very mindful of rock, air, heat, fatigue, fear, okay, I'm really aware of this. Okay, it's all right that I'm feeling all of this. The inquiry still needs to be, well, what? And that was Greg's question the other day, well, what do we do? Joyful effort, reflecting, make of yourself a light. The Buddha was saying, once you've heard it, use it, know your experience, reflect on it in relation to the teachings, investigate it, make it your own. How does it work for you now with this? What's needed here? A couple of weeks ago, Allie loaned me a tent to put up. And I understand about tents. I've heard the Dharma of tents. I know how tents are supposed to work. But this particular tent didn't have any directions with it. No refrigerator magnets. So in order to assemble this tent, I needed to use this basic knowledge that I had about tents, but then really look carefully at this particular tent. What are these things for, and how do they go together, and where do they go on that, and how does it work? And a little bit of trial and error, and a fair amount of help from my husband, in terms of how does this go together? So we use that information to guide what happens next, what we do next. And there are a number of points I want to make about this reflecting aspect. And the first one is to cultivate curiosity. That kind of curiosity about the tent. How does this work here? I know it goes together somehow. How does it work? A favorite story of mine is from a long time ago. Yvonne Rand told a story about being out west and noticing that there were llamas in the fields with the sheep. And she asked her driver, what's the deal with the llamas? And he said, those are guard llamas. Not llamas like with the robes and things. They were the furry kind. With curly hair, those kinds of llamas. She said, what's the deal with the llamas? And he said, those are guard llamas. Guard llamas? He said, yeah. He said, there are lots of wolves around, and they go after the sheep. But the llamas are very curious. And if there's a wolf in the area, instead of running away, the llama approaches it and goes, who are you? And what are you doing here? And can I help you with anything? And the wolf gets a little freaked and runs away. So, she said, so there are these curious guard llamas. And so the Buddha invites that kind of curiosity. And Pat was talking about that last night. That kind of going toward and into a little bit those places where we feel stuck. And sometimes going into can actually be going into by broadening awareness, looking to see a little bit more. What's the context here? What's that? Or what's deeper? What's in it? What's underneath what's happening? To kind of really be curious. What else is here that I'm not really seeing? How does it work? Back to my driving. Are you curious? What does curiosity feel like? Tune in. What does curiosity feel like? Can curiosity be known? Can the goodness of curiosity be known? Must you know the answer right now? Just tune in. Curiosity. The Buddha invited his son Rahula. He said, it was a little bit different. He was talking about intention, but he was saying, before you do something, look to see what you intend. While you're doing it, be curious. Look to see, how's it going? And after you've finished, look to see, how did it work? How did it go? And he wasn't saying that to say afterwards, if it didn't work, get down on yourself. He was saying, use it as information, like you might use practicing your golf swing. How did it work? Did it hit the ball the way I wanted it to? How did it go? Gardening? Cooking? How does it taste? Does it need salt? Water? Tomatoes? What does it need? How's it going? Writing? Painting? Meditating? Driving? How's it going? Curiosity. Delighting in curiosity. The second one, confusion. Soknu Rinpoche says, or it was Mingyur Rinpoche rather, his brother, confusion, I was taught, is the beginning of understanding. The first step of letting go of the neuronal gossip. Don't you love that? The neuronal gossip that used to keep you chained to very specific ideas about who you are and what you're capable of. Confusion is the first step on the path to real well-being. That neuronal gossip, that gossip that says, well, this is what you're supposed to do, and this is how it's supposed to work, and this is when it's supposed to work, and this is why it's supposed to work, and this is why it isn't working, and those and furthermore statements that go through your head when you're trying to figure out what to do. That's the neuronal gossip. Just all those familiar ways. Confusion. Delighting in being confused. Confusion always arises when we're at the edge of something new. Think about it. When you've traveled to Thailand, or you've got a new car, or you bought a new iPhone, or you're making a new recipe, or you're making bread, or you're trying to figure out, whatever it is, growing petunias, confusion is always there at the beginning. Yay, you're confused. You are in a doorway. How awesome is that? Don't turn around. Delight in confusion. It's a wonderful signal. Sometimes we can help ourselves with confusion just as we might in Thailand, any of them. We'd watch a cooking show, or we'd hire a guide, or we'd talk to a trusted friend or a mentor, somebody who can maybe help us know how does this work? I don't understand. Or what's the next step? What do I do now? How does this money? How much money is this again? So that we can look, we can broaden our horizons and invite more help, receiving more guidance, more help. Confusion. Honesty. So again, when the Buddha was talking to Rahula about being honest, look and see, how's it going? And your efforts, I know they're well-intentioned, or let's assume they're well-intentioned for a moment. Look and see, how's it going? Look and see how it is afterwards. Can you be honest with yourself about how it's going? Not as a way of punishment. This is Thanissaro speaking about honesty. He says, in these lessons, the Buddha was training Rahula to be honest with himself and with others. And the key to this honesty is to treat your actions as experiments. Then, if you see the results aren't good, you're free to change your ways. This attitude is essential for developing honesty in your meditation as well. If you regard everything, good or bad, that arises in the meditation as a sign of the sort of person you are, it will be hard to observe anything honestly at all. If an unskillful action arises, you're likely either to come down on yourself as a miserable meditator or to smother that under a cloak of denial. If something skillful arises, you're likely to become proud and complacent and think it's about you, reading it as a sign of your innate good brilliance. As a result, you never get to see if your efforts are actually skillful as they seemed at first glance. To avoid these pitfalls, you can learn to see events simply as events and not as signs of the innate Buddha-ness or innate badness of who you are. Then you can observe these events honestly to see where they come from and where they lead. Honesty, together with patience, puts you in a better position to use the techniques of meditation to explore your own mind. So curiosity, confusion, honesty, patience. Both Pat and Ches spoke about patience. I'm going to talk about patience too. We sometimes think that things should happen quickly or without difficulty. That movement that Chaz talked about, that opening, happens like now. This is Thanissaro again. He says, if the ways of the mind were simple, its problems would be simple and easy to solve. And he goes on to say, the Buddha would have just said, oh, well, here's what you do. You just sit down and you meditate, and you watch your breath, and you develop some concentration, and you develop mindfulness, and that's it. And I'm going to go play golf, and you just do that, and you'll be enlightened, and it'll be fine. But it just isn't that simple in the sense of it is true that things open and move. That is absolutely true. It is not true that they open and move exactly the way we think or on our own schedule. Ajahn Amaro tells a story about himself that I really have enjoyed. And in the 80s, at some point, Ajahn Sumedho asked him to do what's called a tudong, which is a journey from one monastery to another. And it was 830 miles, and a tudong is walking. So he walked 830 miles with a companion from one monastery to another, and he kept a journal. And a few years later, he was writing a book, and he was reading his journal, and he was really struck by how often he wrote about being anxious and fearful. And he hadn't even noticed it as the journey was unfolding. He said, I realized that it was sort of a default habit of mine that if there was something arising, I should worry about it. And it was just sort of an automatic habit that he had somehow acquired in his childhood and he carried into adulthood. And so he's reading his journal, and every other page there's something about being anxious or worried about something. So he says, I think I'll work with this. I'll make this my practice. And now this is a man who's been a monastic for 4 years, who's walked 830 miles mindfully, who teaches meditation. It took him 2 years of having that as his primary practice to work with that anxiety. Took him 2 years for it to really unfold and for that moment to really release and open into the calm and clarity. I've told some of you of a long-standing condition pattern I bumped into with my husband that was not so skillful on my part. It took me 10 years. I'm a little slower than Ajahn Amaro. Took me 10 years for it to open, resolve, not arise again. It kept changing and morphing and shifting. That much impermanence there was. It was a little bit better. I would find myself better. I would say, okay, look, I'm really trying with this. Here it is. And then 4 seconds later, I'd be back in the pit. It just, and it was just a gradual unwinding that required real patience. Real patience. Another quote, Chaz read one from U Pandita, another one about patience from U Pandita. He says, no matter how good your practice is, if it isn't done with patience, it isn't going anywhere. Blockages, insights, we are released from these when conditions are ripe, like once planted well, the irises and the peonies will open. But when they open is not up to me. We give them the conditions. We study the Dhamma. We listen. We hear the Dhamma. We listen. We understand what are the conditions that are needed here. We listen to our wise teachers, our wise friends. What are the conditions? And then we practice with patience. Diligence. Did you know, I didn't, that Michael Jordan was cut from his junior varsity basketball team because he wasn't good enough? Isn't that a cool story? And what he did was he talked to his coach and got his coach every morning to practice with him. And another year, he made the team. Diligent practice. And the humility, his humility to say, look, I really need to practice here, and I need your help, and I'm going to do it. This is something I want. I'm going to do it. Kindness, another one. We've talked about this a whole lot. And many of you in your interviews were talking about your struggles with kindness. You know that critical voice that says, you're really not good enough. You're not cut out for this. Ajahn Suchito has a wonderful list of things that the critical voice does. He says, it drives, but it doesn't nourish. Pushes, but it doesn't support. It sets unattainable goals or timelines. That critic. It engages in absolute thinking. Shoulds and nevers and always. It recriminates for mistakes. Doesn't allow learning and mistakes. A general mood that sees without love or grace. You didn't quite make it, and you're not likely to. Yeah. That critical voice, and you could probably add some, huh? What does your critical voice say? Everybody else can do this. I don't know what's your problem. You know, whatever it is that your critical voice says. Tsoknyi Rinpoche says that self-criticism is a disease of the West. Our striving minds. My friend Gary likes to ask, so how is that working for you? You know, it's a lovely question, you know, how is it working for you? As long as it's offered with kindness. How is it working for you? How is self-criticism? How is that working for you? Huh? How is it working for you? Is self-criticism going to help me on the road? Are you curious still? What is curious? What does curiosity feel like? Is it going to help? Is unkindness going to help? Is it going to help me to be dishonest and not clear about what the actual circumstance is? What's going to help? It is when your practice is rather greedy that you become discouraged with it, Tsoknyi Rinpoche says. So you should be grateful that you have a sign or a warning signal to show you the weak point in your practice. You become discouraged with your practice when it has become idealistic. And the final one, experimentation and a sense of humor. A final one under that second category of reflecting. A willingness to experiment, a willingness to make mistakes, and a bit of a sense of humor. I use this example in some of the interviews. Don't you remember when our children were little and they were learning how to walk? You know, and they would kind of crash into the coffee table and they'd fall on their bums and we would just giggle and we'd say, yay! Because we knew that experimenting, that quality was really what was going to flower in, you know, an Olympic skier someday. Or, you know, all those pictures you have of your 2-year-old with the birthday cake on their face, you know, that we thought were just so terrific and wonderful. You know, can we have that kind of quality, that sense of humor, that delight in ourselves when we have a little birthday cake on our face? When whatever it was we tried, it didn't quite work. Didn't quite work. The musician John Cage, some of you may know him, really an avant-garde, amazing musician. He says, I am trying to be unfamiliar with what I am doing. You know, trying to be unfamiliar. Another jazz pianist whose name escapes me would go, before every performance, he would go out, like in the woods someplace, a pianist, well, I guess it wasn't in the woods, but he would play everything he knew just to get it out of his system. So that when he came to an actual performance, he was just free to experiment. And the third layer, you know, so we hear the teachings. The second layer is we reflect on them. In all those different ways. How does this really work? And the third layer that the Buddha taught is that direct knowing that comes with practice and insight, where it's unshakable. We know what's true. And we know what's true for me, and we know what I need right now, and I know that this is a little different from what that teacher is saying, or from what the other person next to me needs to do. And you've all had that experience, or you wouldn't be here. You've all had that experience of knowing. It's like knowing whether or not you like Brussels sprouts. It's not a mental thing. It's a direct experience of knowing what's true. And also a willingness to know that that too will change. Maybe someday I'll eat Brussels sprouts and I'll like them better. But right now, here's what I need. Right now, I need to push harder. Right now, I need to step back. Right now, what's needed now? And, when you get it, there's a sort of click, that it isn't now and forever. It's just there's a sort of click that we see, and we go, oh. And it's often, I'd venture to say, always a surprise. And it's another reason why we can't program it, because if we knew how it was supposed to work, we would know how it was supposed to work. So by definition, we're looking for something that's new, that's a surprise. And when it comes, we recognize it. So what you see in your teachers, we sit up here and we look really groovy and we say smart things and all that. What you see in your teachers, it's no different for us. It's really no different, except that with a lot of practice, the faith in that becomes more strong. That we trust all of those pieces. We trust the patience, we trust the curiosity, we trust the inquiry. So it enables us to have that kind of courage of heart to play, to experiment, to laugh, to relax, to be generous, to all of those good things, to work really hard, whatever it is that's needed. Because over the years, it's happened so many times that we say, okay, God, well, not God, but we say, okay, I give up. Just teach me what's needed. I'll just do my practice. Be open to receiving it in whatever way it comes. Which brings us to driving. How's your curiosity? So there I was, caught, mindful. I was mindfully caught. I was consulting with my partner, my husband, who in his incredibly wise way is saying, honey, whatever you need to do is fine. No, really. He wasn't like saying, oh my God, don't try to pass. And he wasn't saying, don't be stupid, pass. He wasn't, he was saying, well, you could try to pass, or you could not. He was, and we were talking about it. We were exploring, what. So it was very spacious, but it wasn't like he had a refrigerator magnet for me. So there we were, when the field opened a little bit. Now, mind you, the road did not open. The road is still the same. But the field opened because something changed. What happened was that the tractor trailer, big tractor trailer, inching up the hill in front of me, turned on its left turn signal. Now, I kind of knew he wasn't going to turn left. So I kind of got that part. And then I remembered that in Mexico, drivers, unlike in the United States, are very aware of one another. They're aware of who's in front, they're aware of who's behind, and they help each other out a lot. And the left turn signal, he was telling me, I can see farther than you can. It's okay to pass me. That's what he was telling me. Okay, so now I have a little more information. I still need to decide, right? I still need to decide what to do. It's still up to me. He's not going to rescue me if I go over this edge. I still have to decide. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to pass these 2 tractor trailers on this winding, curving road that is a road to nowhere. So I pulled this old Plymouth out. This Plymouth, remember, does not speed up very quickly. Pulled it out into the left-hand lane and promptly took my foot off the gas because I freaked out. I got scared. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing? And my buddy over here in the other seat, my husband said, honey, don't stop now. You have to decide. If you want to pull back, pull back. But if you want to go, you've got to go for it. Okay. So I went for it and we all lived. But wise effort, really bringing all of that together, allowed me in that moment and you in your moments to discover new qualities of faith, trust in Sangha, trust in community, in support. He didn't know what to tell me to do, but I felt his support and care and permission and courage. So, okay, I can do hard things. I don't have to get out of the car and give it to my husband to drive. I can do hard things. You can do hard things too. But it requires you to really investigate in all those ways what's needed here now. I want to close with a poem from Rumi. He says, keep walking, though there's no place to get to. Don't try to see through the distances. That's not for human beings. Move within, but don't move the way fear makes you move. And in another place, he says, today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the 2 worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Blessings. Let's sit for a minute.